being able to have an up-to-date context file that we could just switch over to a new agent and it would be mostly up to date was very, very useful in like the 6th hour.
I feel like most of the gameplay logic was how I envisioned it.
Very rushed launch. I was very excited to like sign off with it working and like we could click and see it and the state was making sense.
Hey everyone, we recently had a hackathon and I wanted to get together with some of the people who worked on the hackathon and talk a little bit about their experiences. So today I have Hank and Jonathan who worked together on a recent hackathon. Our recent hackathon was on the theme of games. So I just want to kind of introduce Hank and Jonathan and let them talk a little bit about their projects.
Yeah, so I work with Jonathan on the Grace and Mercy project and we were part of a team for this game-based hackathon and yeah, we worked together to build a multiplayer Minesweeper game. Yeah, I think I'll pass it over to Jonathan.
Yeah, hey everyone. I'm a dev with Olio. I work with Hank. I've been writing code for maybe 5 or 6 years and in tech for longer than that. So happy to be here going over our hackathon project.
Yeah, so we gave everybody the challenge of come up with a game of some sort in one day and see if you can make it like online and playable. So, do you want to talk a little bit about the game that you guys made?
Yeah, we had a couple ideas floating around. I think I was suggesting some like very complicated drawing-based game or an even more complicated gambling simulation game based on a card game I played as a kid. But I think Jonathan had a really good idea when he suggested something 2D, so based on a matrix that would be a little simpler fundamentally. We were discussing different ideas. I think there was one you were considering before we settled on Minesweeper when Jonathan was we both wanted to do something multiplayer or concurrent because we're going to be there was talk on our current project of doing something like that down the road, so we wanted exposure to that. As we were discussing gameplay, I got very into the idea of having multiplayer Minesweeper where you have that traditional like empty space and then the numbers along the side, and then if someone laid a mine near that, you would just like see those numbers increment, and I thought that was very funny. I think that that was after discussing it and like laughing about a couple of the gameplay elements back and forth, we decided that that was probably the way forward if we were getting that much enjoyment just talking about it. So
The only other idea I had was, I wanted to use WebSockets, which was a technology that I had never really experimented with before. We talked about doing like a typing, beat each other, words per minute, kind of like Mavis, you can teach us typing. I don't know if you guys ever did that in school, but like a head-to-head thing, I thought would be fun. But I think it was maybe going to be too simple. So Minesweeper seemed like a good increment in a challenge, but not too complex, so you might not be able to knock it out in one day.
Cool. Well, do you guys want to demo it real quick since we're talking about this, just to give people kind of like visual?
so this is the game. Um, Pretty simple. There's a leaderboard, game creation, and you create it to get your game lobby ID, then post that in the room, and anyone can join, which was interesting during the actual hackathon. I think we played against.
Do you want to play? You haven't had a run through it yet.
Yeah, I'll join. Let me see if I can. Actually, I need oh, I got it. Got the URL here.
Cool. Yeah, so each turn consists of two phases. The first phase is placing a mine on the board. Place one right here, and then you can flag it, and then you select an area to reveal. And so that's the end of my turn. Now Scott is allowed to place a mine.
Oh, I'm placing mines here. Okay.
If you place a mine on a mine, you do lose. So it's like you're taking 2 turns per turn, and only one of them gives you information. So now you have to pick a cell to reveal.
Okay. Oops. There it goes.
Yeah, it's I don't think we've ever even gotten close to finishing a game. But yeah, you can see here afterwards who placed their mines where. Yeah, a little post game summary, and then yeah, there's the chat option and can message back and forth.
Yeah, I'll say, oops, I lost.
Oh, let's see. Yeah, one of our favorite features is that the chat is not, you cannot specify that it stays minimized. Any message will reopen it and gives a little bit of opportunity for gamesmanship. Yeah, I think that that's very fun. Um,
So distraction is a game element too, right?
yeah, exactly.
Another thing we could call out is that there's support for spectators to view the games, which was fun when we did the hackathon. We were able to get everyone to join, and then you see like a view of the board. You see what you're seeing right now, basically, and where people are placing, and spectators can also interact with the chat and stuff, and players can see who's spectating. So that was something we added on like in the stretch after we had like the base like gameplay elements. I started kind of working on theming, and Hank did like the spectator implementation mostly on his own.
Did the idea change much from like what you initially thought it was going to be?
Would say that there were elements of the gameplay that we weren't on board with each other, like that we had to discuss along the way. I'm not sure we really changed things, but I remember having a conversation about whether or not the revealed spaces on the board should be a shared view between the users. And in my head, initially, those would be tracked separately. So you'd have like your true game element, and then each player would be managing that state separately. But, Hank convinced me it's a little bit more fun to have that shared view, and it simplified things. I think it was a better experience. Hank, were there any other things that we had to,
That was the main one. Before we started, I was also under the impression that we were going to have two separate boards. So like each, I guess that's the same idea, like they have the two different views versus shared view. And then that came back up with spectators of like when you have the spectator view, they can see all bomb placements, flag placements. And so we ended up kind of implementing both like shared view and different views. So, but that was the main thing we did on the fly. I think most of the rest of it stayed pretty consistent, aside from like stretch goals like chat and spectators.
Nice. Well, let's talk about building it a little bit. Like, how did you guys structure the day? And did you know first thing in the morning, Minecraft, here we go? Or how did it go? Not Minecraft.
Oh, sorry, Scott, I didn't catch you there.
Oh, I was just saying I mispronounced not Minecraft, Minesweeper.
Oh, well, you do have a son, so, I'm sure you
Exactly.
got Minecraft on the brain a lot. Yeah, I would say like for me, we kind of were busy with our, normal project, and then Hank was messaging like, okay, we should probably get our stuff together, so we started thinking about like the stack the day before, and I have like kind of a go-to stack for, quick front end projects where I like to deploy to GitHub pages just because I know the workflow. I know it's really easy with Vite. But there was some considerations with like WebSockets, how we were going to manage the game state. Like we'd need a real back end to get that working. So at that point, I started researching other options, and I was using a cursor, like asking it some questions to get the AI's input. And they were like, well, you could, manage your own node backend to do this, or you can use this product called Supabase, which I had never heard of before, which gave us like, a free Postgres instance. We could write most of our all of our like subscription and WebSocket code was basically baked into it with very minimal setup. So I was pretty sold on that. And then I ran the stack by Hank. He seemed on board with it, and we, set up those building blocks and came up with a document, like a game plan document for how we were going to approach the day. So we had like, an MD document with maybe like 15 or 16 steps. And then when it came to like actually implementing it, we had like a clear path forward, and we just kind of tackled them like one at a time.
How did you kind of do that? Did you tackle it concurrently, or did you divide it up into a sequence that made sense?
We paired like traditional pairing like the entire day and just stayed on. We talked about like switching navigator and driving like throughout the day, like basically on like a per item basis. But once we had the context window flowing, like Hank started us off, we just decided to let Hank, screen share, and he did the driving and navigating for a lot of it. While I sat back and just kind of, added comments. Towards the end of it, we did split and we were doing PRs. Like I added some theming and you were working on spectating. Like last 2 hours, we were like, let's cram in as much as we can. But for most of the day, we were making sure like we'd get a little element in and then we would make sure our whole CI worked and the prod deployment worked. So, you know, every little incremental step, I think we had like 20 something deploys throughout the day just to have that like sanity check and not have to scramble at the end of the day.
I was going to say another factor in me driving was that I had like set up the Supabase CLI so that I was able to more quickly interact with the schema in addition to having that context window. So I could make those updates and it just kind of made sense for me to stay on.
So when you say the context window, you're saying, you, Jonathan, and Mr. Claude are basically a throuple, right? So to what degree did you actually do some of your own like bespoke programming? Was there any of that, or is it more just quality assurance and prompt
Made sure I
engineering?
got like a couple lines in there,
Gotcha.
mostly for personal pride.
Yeah,
Yeah, it
you're
was
not.
very low.
Yeah, you were not alone. I think when we were going through the observing the projects, a lot of owing to the time frame and also just the fluidity of that tool, which is a lot of people did the same thing, right? So
Yeah, such a boon for a small, quick project like that, before you get into the nitty gritty of using it in a real world application. It's awesome for this use case.
did you ever do the trick where you had two tabs working on something at the same time? Yeah,
No,
that's
I've been
another
too
way.
scared to go that far.
Yeah, that's kind of like the cursor agentic development loop. You can, yeah, it's something for next time to check out. Yeah.
Definitely, definitely. We could share our, planning document if we want to look
Yeah.
at that.
Yeah, let's see.
And I think another thing about the planning document, Jonathan, you created that using the plan feature of Cursor.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was really useful. And then another thing Jonathan did that was very useful was making sure that Cursor was updating that planning document. Because late in the day, we got to the point where the context window was almost full and suggestions for edits were taking quite a long time. And being able to have an up-to-date context file that we could just switch over to a new agent and it would be mostly up to date was very, very useful in like the 6th hour, final hour, I guess.
Yeah, so this was our living doc, and yeah, what I had done was just go to the plan mode, which is really cool. I don't know if you guys are using Cursor still, but basically, we could give a prompt that, I don't know, why don't we do something? Make this game for 3 people. This is going to be super vague, so I don't know how it will do. But what I like about this is it's creating steps and will normally ask you really intelligent qualifying questions, which you can ask, and then it will generate a document like this for you. So this was kind of the origin of it. This might be way too abstract a question for it.
When were you doing this, like updating the game document design during the day?
I think like pretty regularly. We had, yeah, you can see a lot of the updates to it. I guess we had like 6 or 7 updates as things got adjusted throughout the day. Uh, okay, so it
I think it started out with like 15 sections and ended with 23.
okay, so this is what I wanted to illustrate is it's asking, these follow-up questions, which is really helpful because you can really, drill down what you want and say like 1B, 2B, 3C. see what it comes up with, which is a lot better than the traditional agent mode where it would already be committing changes, right? And then you'd have to be like, oh, what's going on?
So is this basically different than ask in a sense that it is like modifying this document automatically?
Yeah, I think that's the main difference is it's creating this actual MD doc. The ask mode, I think, would keep the information in this window over here. And to me, it's very helpful to like see this over in this different pane. I don't know. Maybe it is exactly the same with the markup styles. It does look very similar. So yeah, the cool thing is you can go back and forth, read this, and then ask it to make updates to this, and then ultimately you hit this build button, and it will have all these to-dos that'll go through. So this is something I've been using kind of recently. This is what we used for our to get our MD, and then yeah, just I think the day before we did this initialization, so we wouldn't get stuck on boilerplate. So I took care of that. And then we just started in on this. Hank had outlined the CLI or downloaded the CLI, so we had that. I had not thought about that, so that was very helpful. The deployment, the CI was already set up, but we just started with the game features like right away. I think we actually did the database schema first, didn't we, Hank?
Yeah, I think so. Well, let's see. Can you scroll up to the three? Yeah, once we had the deployments, I think we started right in on Supabase.
But a lot of the day was just like, okay, take a look at 3, try to implement it, and then we'd see how well the AI could do it, and then we'd launch up stuff, do the validations that we could, So for the database schema, we'd go into the Supabase like client, the UI client, and make sure everything was up, make sure we could connect to it. But there wasn't a lot that we could validate until we actually got down to some of the game logic. And then we started discovering all the bugs and stuff, and we'd have to start modifying things like this was a thing where the comments had been added. This was definitely something we needed to address where, okay, when you place a flag, we decided we didn't want both players to see the flag, so we had to modify the schema, and I think we had to spend some time iterating on this.
What was like the biggest challenge that you guys ran into, or was it anything sticky or any near disasters?
I would say, I mean, Hank, I don't know what it was in your mind. For me, there was two. The first one was just making sure Supabase was working and we were actually getting the real-time updates because there was a moment when we had everything, it looked to be configured correctly, but we're both new users to this platform. We really don't know what we're doing. So we're beholden to the AI and like checking settings like in the UI. So there was a brief moment when we weren't getting the updates and we couldn't figure out why, but we were able to jump over that hurdle. Once we got past that, it was kind of like, okay, we can breathe. Like the core subscription element is working. And then the other item I was going to say was once we had the UI working with the board and turns, like once the actual gameplay logic was working, it was super buggy. Like it was laughably buggy, and like I think we both would have been proud to demo what we had at that point, but it was like, okay, there's some serious flaws in this logic and we have to actually analyze this. So
At what point in the day were you at the point where you could debug it? I was, what you said was actually like there to debug. Like when chronologically, when was that?
We started at like 9, and I think by 11:30 or 12 by noon, I think we had the board registering input. Does that sound right, Jonathan?
yeah, I think we broke for lunch and we already had like the subscription or the updates and the turns working. So yeah.
Still a little buggy, I think, when we broke for lunch, but the biggest ones had been solved. Like, I remember, yeah, it kept think. I laughed when we first detonated a mine on someone else's mine. It was like, congratulations, you win, you found the mine. And I was like, not exactly.
So
Yeah.
like most of the day after that point was debugging, and that's where the human element was, kind of like going in there and yeah. Hmm. Interesting.
Yeah, there was a lot of like, yeah, like going through the actual schema implementation and like the flag placement, for instance, we had to like handhold it pretty hard to make sure the gameplay was what we were actually envisioning.
And the QA process was kind of complicated by the fact that you needed two players. So you could do it locally with an incognito window, but that was kind of weird when we were pairing too. So sometimes we'd have like local testing with the incognito window, and then we'd have the deployed testing. I remember at one point, Hank, you were sharing like 4 screens, and I'm like, oh man, I don't remember what we're testing here.
Yeah, like which one's playing, who's in what lobby.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a little hectic. Could have probably been done a little more efficiently.
There any Easter egg bugs still in place for people who want to try this?
What's the one that we said we can't do in the demo? I think if you click on if you lay a flag and then click on it, you lose or something.
Oh, yeah, there was a way to just completely bypass the game logic so you never get in a losing state, and I can't remember what it was. It was like if you
Yeah.
placed a bomb and then you clicked right next to it, it was guaranteed to never blow up or something. That's not right, but there is some Easter egg hack that I've already forgotten myself where you can just
I think it
not
has to do with like
block the
masking
region.
the bomb state using flags or something like that, or selecting what you immediately placed. There's something wrong there.
There you
Right.
go. That's the very definition of an Easter egg, even to you if you discover it later. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the
Yeah.
things we said going into it was like 2 boards, 1 bug or something, and then 1 board, 10 bugs. But where's
Uh,
the fun in that? So decided
uh,
to go with the buggier route.
yeah, I mean, so there were bugs, you kind of squashed them. Was there any point, as the clock was ticking down, they were saying 30 minutes left, 15 minutes left? Did you ever feel at any point that something was going to endanger the actual release by the end of the day?
Gotta mention Jonathan's great idea to block off an hour, like cut off feature development an hour before for like styling. And I think that that was a really good way to do it. I don't think we ended up using the whole hour for styling. I think we cheated on that, but the idea that we had to have it in a bow tied state before the end of the day, I think really helped us avoid that situation where we're trying to, like I was implementing, I think, spectators 10 minutes after we had determined our cutoff. But if I had been working up until the final bell, I think that would have, and we got into a state while developing spectators where we might have broken the whole thing. So
No more schema changes half an hour before.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, no more migrations.
a moratorium on the schema changes was a great idea.
Yeah, some other teams in the hackathon were kind of tempted to just like, let's just write this whole thing, right? 'Cause it's so easy to just have Claude or Cursor like make massive changes at the turn of a hat, and sometimes it would just do it by itself, right? If you weren't careful. But yeah, I'm glad that you were able to have some discipline, probably carried over from writing production code for a living, right? So
Yeah, there's some fear, healthy fear baked in for breaking builds and stuff over the years.
If you had another day to work on it more, what would you add or change?
I mean, one of the first things we talked about was buying a domain and getting it like actually out there for people, which could still happen. I think that would be minimal effort. Sorting out some of those bugs. I feel like most of the gameplay logic was how I envisioned it. Hank, is there anything you had?
There was one thing I wanted the day of, and then there's one thing that I thought would be like a very, very stretch goal. But the day of, I wanted that leaderboard to have like a username so that you could human readable like username, and for spectators, currently it's spectator 1 through N. Having that be a little like identifiable would be fun just to like know who your friends are, and that's always fun to come up with silly names. But As far as additional features, I thought like abstracting away to just, yeah, like you said, 3 players, 4 players, 5 players, just make it as chaotic as possible seems to be in line with the spirit of what we were trying to do. So that would have been fun to try and make that extension happen, but I think that's a little bigger of a lift.
What was your proudest moment? Something like, you had, given the pressure situation, what do you want to brag about? Besides, actually shipping and winning it, right?
I think for me, like when the chat thing was really cool, it's something I've always wanted to implement, and that was an add-on that we snuck in like one of the final hours. And that moment when we had spectators joining and actually like interacting with it during the demo felt like really good, It wasn't just like people were nodding off and, waiting to log off. You saw people in there using the thing that you had built immediately. That was pretty cool.
I think I accidentally played against Ben during the demo. Yeah, the interactivity was good. It was easy to use such that we were getting random people participating. Um, for me, the most satisfying thing is I was very nervous about the Supabase working out of the box, and I think right like that was a very rushed launch. I was very excited to like sign off with it working and like we could click and see it and the state was making sense after we addressed some bugs, like getting it to the point where there were 3 hours left and I got to start thinking about chat and like spectators and like fun behaviors. Like I think one of the things Jonathan added that really affected the gameplay was that huge boom animation when you lose. I think like getting to feel secure enough to start like actually thinking about the implementation of all these more fun ideas. That was a really satisfying because it went from being like, okay, let's get this out to all right, what can we do? It was that shift was pretty fun to feel.
Yeah, I think that's called sizzle. You're able to add sizzle, I think, to those little garnishes, right? To just kind of make it more fun, right? And polish. I'm hearing you time things and scope things enough so that you can end up with something that's actually fun and reducing the danger. So, do you have any other kind of like big takeaways from the hackathon? Any future hackathon participant advice to give now that you went through that?
I think that I was really impressed with Supabase and what we were able to ship with that. I would definitely look at that for a hackathon in the future. Their hobby plan is free. The setup's really easy. The CLI seemed to make sense. Like we were able to do all of our schema definitions and stuff really easily, generate types from the schema. So that I think just made the, you know, AI more intelligent, having all those types accessible. So that was the biggest takeaway for me, I think, is this is really, really a cool platform.
That's cool. How was the speed of like deploying changes to that?
So Supabase, it would have like a local definition of your database and then you would push that like a PR to the remote. And so every time you made a schema change, you would build it locally, and then you would just Supabase push. And that if you were making a large change or had like changed your data quite a bit, it could take like up to like 3 minutes, but we were pretty minimal. But I don't know about scaling, how that would look if you were to build something significantly larger.
You said something very interesting is like defining your types made the agent a little more intelligent. That's, I think, pretty significant. Plus, also, a takeaway for me is that your planning doc probably kept it all on Rails, right? Give you a track to follow. So humans and agent with Rails, right? Planning doc, types. Yeah, that's a big takeaway for me.
Yeah, that was really nice to have. I mean, at any given moment, we could just look at that and say, where are we? Have we already completed this? And just to keep it updated too.
So you guys kind of just like worked on one computer and just shared screen, right? It wasn't you didn't you really parallelize the work that much, kind of just pair programmed.
The only time that we did that was when Hank was like, I'm going to do spectators. I'm like, I don't want anything to do with this, man. So I'm just gonna I'm gonna do theming and start in on the styling a little bit. So I'll just do something. So I, checked out a branch then, and then, it was nice to just do like traditional pairing throughout the day.
Yeah, that was nice. Also, like the whole validation loop, it went nicely with the pair programming approach because we would deploy, then like start thinking about the gameplay while we had like would tell the AI to implement maybe the next thing, and we would validate. So like while deploy, like between talking through our next update or anything that we were seeing versus like having the agent go do work versus deploying, that flow kind of seemed, it wasn't too inhibitory. It seemed like it worked, the timing worked out a little bit.
See, so like kind of like single terminal, parallel brains. The two of you anticipating the next thing, and then obviously cursor doing its thing while that's going on.
Yeah, and then we had the two computers for validation, like the two terminals, because we were, but like, and then we would explore like, oh well, I'm seeing this. What are you seeing on your end?
Right.
Yeah, so that we could find more bugs for the next iteration. And I did want to say like a bit huge thing was keeping the decision to keep the doc updated as we made live changes, because I know we discussed that very briefly at the beginning of the day, and by the time like there was an hour left, having that doc completely up to date with all the current state proved to be really valuable.
All right. Well, any final thoughts or comments before we wrap it up?
It's just awesome working with Hank. I thought he did a really good job. Downloading the CLI saved us probably critical moments in the beginning of the day, and I totally not thought about that. So that was great.
I
Yeah,
think maybe that was like there's a new addition to hackathons. Like the day before, you can start at least thinking about what you're gonna do, and maybe like getting your tooling organized. Right, that was probably made it more smooth.
yeah, I felt like I got bit in the first hackathon by that exact issue, so I was very
Yeah,
keen to avoid that.
that's a big tip for hackathoners. Should at least have some affordance for the mechanical aspects before the hackathon a little bit, even though it's a 1 day hackathon, right?
Decide your stack.
Yeah.
Maybe get familiar with it.
Choose it so you don't spend the first 3 hours choosing and downloading artifacts.
Working with Jonathan was great too, and yeah, like he's like figuring out the whole stack and having that planning document ready to go to work off and iterate from really made all the difference.
I'm glad that you guys enjoyed it, and congratulations for being the winner of the hackathon. So, Team Hankathon, I think it was.
Hackathon, the Jonathan erasure is unacceptable. It's Hackathon support too.
Philip called me that during like our weekly wrap up last week, and I was like, "What?" I didn't realize I had been called on.
Yeah, congratulations on winning. Thanks for getting together and talking about it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
our
thanks for putting it
pleasure.
together.
Thanks for hosting the hackathon. It's really awesome to work at a place that does this kind of thing. So
You're welcome.
very grateful.
Yeah, I feel like it's one of the most fun things we do. All right, thanks.
See you guys.